All right, your surprising studs from Fantasy Week 15 starts with Jerick McKinnon. We talked about him earlier in the show. You can rewind for that. So how about these wide receivers that are rostered in about 8% of leagues? Unless I have a typo, they're all rostered in exactly 8% of leagues, which is weird. But do you have any interest in Noah Brown, who had 2 touchdowns, and he had 85 yards last week? He had 49 yards and 2 touchdowns this week for the Cowboys. Russell Gage, who had 2 touchdowns, including a garbage time. And KJ Osborne, who's had 2 good games in a row. This one was a terrific game. 157 yards and a touchdown on 16 targets. So it's Noah Brown, Russell Gage, KJ Osborne, Dave.
So let's start with Noah Brown. Played 55 snaps, ran 26 routes, had a target share of 30%. This was surprising. I would be surprised if he were to keep this up. Remember, not only do we expect Michael Gallup to be the number 2 receiver in this offense, but they just signed T.Y. Hilton. This is one that I don't think is going to last. I would not chase what Noah Brown's doing. Russell Gage is next. 42 snaps for him, 31 routes. That's a good amount of work. 28.6% target share. The 2 touchdowns are nice. 12 targets, 8 catches. Maybe it sticks a little bit just because the Bucs are looking for something that works in their offense. Because Mike Evans is he had a better week this week than he had in his previous 5, but still not great. I don't know if I'm chasing Gage outside of the deepest of leagues. You brought up KJ Osborne. We've seen it from Osborne over the course of his career. He played pretty much every snap for the Vikings, 54 routes. Could have been a byproduct of A, their game plan, B, the fact that they were chasing points in the second half, but not somebody that I would look at and say, yeah, I got to go and get him. Was there another receiver?
Now there is. Zay Jones.
Okay, we saved the best for last.
109 yards, 3 touchdowns. Do you think he is the guy to start over Christian Kirk if you had to choose between the two? And Dave, I am already really nervous about recommending Jaguars at the Jets on Thursday. They're so good on defense. It's crazy. But what do you think, Zay Jones or Christian Kirk? And do you think we're starting them in week 16?
I think fantasy managers are going to start Zay Jones. Will they start him over Christian Kirk? It's not the right kind of matchup to do it because, as you mentioned, the Jets have these great outside corners, and they get good pressure on the quarterback. They did it today, even without Quinnen Williams on the field. But if Quinnen's back, that makes it even harder on Trevor Lawrence to throw those balls down the way. But the volume has been, it's undeniable with Zay Jones. And I believe it was his first touchdown, the exact same play that he should have had a touchdown against the Lions with. That was 2 games ago. So I think that fantasy managers aren't going to care what we say about Zay Jones. They're just going to start him. And if you've got him and you're not sure if you want to use him against the Jets in week 16, cool. He plays Houston in week 17. And I know that we've watched Houston play really good overall the past 2 games. I'm still not buying them. I still think that they're a team that you can score some serious points on.
The whole year,
the Jaguars
points to receivers.
Yeah, but I think that'll change. I mean,
Derek Stingley's on IR. Nelson was out today, and yet still fewest points to receivers. I don't know.
Okay. Well, look, I think Zay Jones is absolutely going to continue to be on the radar for fantasy managers. Do I like him better than Christian Kirk next week? I don't think I'm going to say yes to that, but I think he is somebody that's going to be he was a top 30 receiver for me this week. Probably should have been top 5. But he probably should have been closer to 24 than where I had him.
And now going into the game, Trevor Lawrence led the NFL in end zone throws that went into the end zone. And I don't think that changed because there was definitely some of those in this game.
And the other smart thing that he did, he stayed away from Trayvon Diggs. Yeah. The 2 of the touchdowns were against Kelvin Joseph. They were really smart about how they went and attacked Dallas. And they needed to get their act together because in the first half, they were down 21-7 and they looked like they weren't going anywhere. And they came back and charged really hard in this game. They should be proud of themselves.
Yeah, the Cowboys should not have lost. I think it was a bad loss for them. They should not have given that game away. It was that interception. I mean, you could talk about the interception in overtime. It wasn't Dak's fault, but the one he threw in the third quarter was a game changer for sure. All right, let's talk about our mega duds. Every week I defend Justin Herbert, even though the big production hasn't been there. He scored 8 freaking points against the Titans. He's my mega dud quarterback. We got some running backs as well, but why don't you tell me? I'm going to give you the list. I want you to tell me if you're losing faith in these guys. Justin Herbert, Joe Mixon, 11 carries for 21 yards, did have 5 catches for 33 yards. Miles Sanders, a shockingly terrible game. He had 29 total yards and a fumble and 1 catch. Why Why don't we do those three? Because the next ones are sort of in a different category. But Herbert, Mixon, Miles Sanders. Herbert has the Colts, Mixon, the Patriots next week, Miles Sanders, the Cowboys. You losing faith in these guys?
I'll lose a little faith in Justin Herbert, but not enough to say that he's not a top 10 quarterback next week. There just aren't enough top 10 quarterback caliber players. And the Colts matchup should be favorable. I feel like we learned in this game that the Chargers don't really carefully game plan for their opponents. And I know that sounds silly, and I'm sure I'm wrong.
Yes. Okay, so let's take that back.
Adam, they had a whole series of goal-to-go plays where it was Josh Kelly running it between the guards, and they scored. But if you're really game planning and putting in a detailed game plan against the Titans, why would you run it there at the goal line multiple times in a row?
They scored, didn't they?
Yeah, but it took them like 4 times for them to do it. So it was a little frustrating, and I don't know, man. Herbert should have had a much bigger game than what he had. So no, I'm sure they game planned very well. And Herbert is on one of the highest passing volume teams. The interception stunk. And he got a lot of yards on the last drive of the game, connected with Michael Williams on a 35-yarder. It was a little crazy for him to get he was lucky to have the points that he did have. So
Mike Williams in particular. And Mike Williams was about to make this list until that last drive.
Yeah, listen, he still could, because 10 PPR points isn't really that great. Now, you mentioned Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
We had a report on our pregame show from Tom Spencer. We mention his name all the time. That Perine was going to start taking a little bit more work away from Mixon. The Bengals wanted to get him involved. It happened. Mixon played 61% of the snaps. Perine played 40%. Perine played a little bit more on 3rd and 4th downs. Mixon dominated near the goal line. So it's not a situation where Joe Mixon is like in a true 50-50 split, and you never know what his role is going to be. He still works as the running downs guy for Cincinnati, and he's still going to have opportunities at the goal line, but he's not going to dominate as like a top 10 running back until he gets into matchups that are really, really good. And the matchup next week against New England, I don't think that's really, really good. And then he's got Buffalo and Baltimore after that. It's a tough schedule for Mixon the rest of the way. I think you've got to treat him as a number 2 fantasy running back. Who was the third name you gave me?
Miles Sanders. My take on Miles Sanders is that what happens this week with Miles Sanders has no bearing on what happens next week with Miles
Agreed.
Sanders.
100%.
Really surprised at the way this game played out. I bet on the Eagles. I don't bet big, but -8.5. I thought they were going to steamroll them, and it just didn't happen. And Sanders.
They've also got a tough schedule the rest of the way. It's the Cowboys, it's the Saints, it's the Giants.
That's not tough.
You don't think that's tough?
So, well, first of all, let's not count week 18, right? Because the Giants, their defense stinks, but that's week 18. Dallas is interesting. They do have a good defense. I think the Eagles should be able to run on them, but New Orleans is not. I think New Orleans' run defense is really not good this year, Dave. I mean,
it's true. Algier had over 100 yards today. Fair point.
Dallas, I don't know. I mean, it's not like matchups really matter for the Eagles. They can run on anyone, and it's just like Jalen Hurts had 3 rushing touchdowns, right? He had 3 rushing touchdowns. Those could have been Miles Sanders touchdowns.
They tried to make one of them a Miles Sanders touchdown toward the end of the game, and Sanders couldn't get in on a couple of tries, and then they said, all right, Jalen Hurts it is. So Jalen Hurts ran on Chicago, but his rushing average was worse than Miles Sanders, and Sanders averaged 3.8. They only gave him 11 carries. It was a little surprising. I thought Sanders would get a little bit more work, but I agree with you. He's still a running back that I'm really comfortable starting. Probably going to take him ahead of Mixon in non-PPR, to be honest with you.
Here are Miles Sanders' PPR fantasy points when he does not score a touchdown.
Oh, this will be good.
11.6. And then the rest of them are all 8.4 or fewer. So there's been 6 games where he hasn't scored a touchdown. 11.6, 5.4, 8.4, 5.4, 5.8, 1.9. But I really don't have any regrets starting him. I have no regrets telling people to start him. This was the type of game where he should have had a really good game. And sometimes, sports happens and things don't go the way we feel. Devontae Adams, he's on the mega duds list. Dalton Schultz is on the mega duds list. Those 2 guys, Adams had 4 catches for 28 yards against the Patriots. Dalton Schultz had 2 catches for 15 yards. It was wide open, and for some reason, Dak Prescott decided to make a more difficult throw in the end zone to Noah Brown.
Yep.
And Greg Dulcich had 1 catch for 11 yards, where Eric Tomlinson caught a touchdown for the Broncos. But I think we can get away from Dulcich. But What do you think about Adams? He's fine, right? Just get that out of the way.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the Patriots always do a good job of taking away a team's number one receiver. I don't know how the Steelers are going to do that next week. So Devontae Adams should certainly be in line for a real good game.
How about Dalton Schultz here? 2 catches, 15 yards. He's had some of these, the last 5 games, he's had 3 games with fewer than 6 PPR fantasy points, Dalton Schultz.
So what do you look for from a fantasy tight end? It's almost the same thing that we talk about with any other position. You want guys, they're going to play a lot, get a lot of targets, get some opportunities near the goal line. And it didn't work out his way this week. I think most weeks he is in that type of position where he gets decent target volume and the chance to score a touchdown. And I think that'll continue for him against Philly next week. They're going to need him against Philly.